Have you ever wondered how to make your own sun-dried tomatoes? I'll show you how next. Are you like me and have planted way more cherry and grape tomato plants than you think you're ever going to be able to get through in a whole year? Well, have this cool thing, dehydrate them. These make the most awesome little snacks that you're going to love, and I'll show you how. And the bonus is I'm going to show you how to make your own DIY sun-dried tomatoes. Okay, as we get started, these are the tomatoes that we're working with right now. They are grape tomatoes and some cherry tomatoes that we've got going on. I don't have a batch ready from the garden yet because it's a little too early. So here's what we have. These tomatoes here, and then just regular plain grape tomatoes. And what I've done is they are currently sitting in a water vinegar bath. This is about 50% water, 50% vinegar, because using just a splash of vinegar isn't quite enough to get any toxins out or try to clean it the best that you can. Vinegar is not going to remove everything, but if you need to clean it, remember you need to do a good solution of vinegar to water. So as soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to pull them out of my strainer, empty it, and then this is just my salad spinner that you see right here. It makes a good way to soak things, and then I can quickly run it through the salad spinner to help dry them off, and then we'll get to cutting. Okay, I've already started cutting a few of these, but I'm going to show you what I'm doing. Basically, I'm taking most of them and just cutting them in half. Okay, you can remove the gel and seeds if you want. I don't bother, but if it bothers you, then just take it out. You can use a spoon or a fork or even the tip of your knife, and we're going to cut these just in half. For larger ones like this, what I might do is cut it in half and then cut it in quarters, just like that. So I'm going to fly through these, and then we'll get started on putting these on our trays. Okay, now that I'm done cutting those, I want to give you some tips about loading these onto your dehydrator trays. You can use a fruit leather tray, you can use parchment or baking paper, you can use whatever you'd like. But here's the tip about doing these sun-dried tomatoes, dried tomatoes in the dehydrator. You're going to want to put the cut side up, skin side down. Always do it with the skin side down. And the reason being is that the sugars that are in tomatoes will easily get onto your tray and stick. And what you don't want is for things to stick. It makes it harder for the end process to get them off. You don't have to give these a ton of space between them. You just don't want them piled on top of each other. But skin side down for all of them. And it doesn't matter that they're not all exactly the same size. You're going to dry these thoroughly until it's all done anyway. So it may take a little longer for some things than others. But you're allowing the moisture when you do these skin side down. You're allowing more of the moisture to escape the tomato, keeping more of the essence of the tomato there. And you're not allowing for those juices that are sugar laden to stick to the things that are underneath. So if you're using, like this Kasori tray well, the Excalibur already comes with silicone mesh, but any other dehydrator that has a hard surface, you're not going to get sticking. So let me load the rest of these trays and we'll get on to the next bit. This is one of the easiest projects to do as far as prep time and getting it ready to go and just letting it go. There's almost nothing you have to do to this. You do not have to blanch. You do not have to do anything but wash them and cut them, and it's ready to go. These should take about probably anywhere from 10 to 18 hours to dry. It depends on your home's humidity, the power of your machine, how tightly you pack these, how large they are, how wet they are. There are so many things to play into how long they dry. So it just takes anywhere from 10 to 18 plus hours. Dry it until it's dry, not by the time it's given. I'm going to be drying these at 125. You can choose whatever temperature you like, but if you're doing any of these whole, you need to make sure to keep the temperature down some. You don't want to have it up higher than that because you don't want to have case hardening, in which a small whole tomato will dry faster on the outside. You think it's dry, and on the inside it's not, and it can cause mold down the road if you're not checking. So there's our first tray. Let me get the rest of them loaded, and then I'll show you what it looks like going into the dehydrator. Okay, here we go. So I've got 3 trays loaded. These are the only 3 trays I happen to have available right now. I've got some things happening on 2 other trays that I can't put them in. So we're going to go ahead and just go with these 3. And it is okay to run your dehydrator if it's not full. When you have a stackable dehydrator, you should have all of your trays in because it works best that way. But when I don't have enough, I run it when it's not full on my cabinets and it's just fine. We are shutting the door, turning the temp on. All right, you can do this as low as you want to. It does not matter. It just takes a little longer. Then we're going to go with time. I don't care because I don't worry about what the time in the machine says. I think that might be, no, it's not as high as it goes. It goes higher. We're just going to let it run until it's finished. I don't care about the timer. Then we're going to start, and soon we're going to have pretty, pretty little tomatoes. Something I wanted to mention that I do love with any dehydrator that I have is on the very bottom of the machine, I put something to protect the bottom of the machine. Cosori has these slide-in fruit leather trays that are lipped that I love using one of them to just always line the bottom of my machine so that when it's finished running, I just have to pull this out to clean it, and it works so well. So especially with tomatoes or anything else juicy like this, you want to go ahead and protect your machine if possible. You ready to see these? Okay, here is them completely dry. I leave mine in longer than necessary because I want to make sure they are fully dry before I'm ready to start doing anything else to them. But here's what you're looking for. Dry, leathery, meaning there's no stickiness to them. They are they just have a leather feel to the surface of the fruit. And here you go. This is what they all look like. And it's kind of sad that they all lose their characteristic colors when they're dried. They all kind of look the same. But still, there you go. So what we're going to do next is we're going to allow these to come to room temperature. Then we're going to condition them. Then we're going to store them. Then we're going to do something a little extra at the end to make them like sun-dried tomatoes. So next step, conditioning. Okay, now that we have our sun-dried tomatoes, well, now that we have our dehydrated grape tomatoes and cherry tomatoes on our finished trays, they have come to room temperature. So I know they're cooled off. So now I can test more. If they easily can just be shoved off the cellular mesh or your tray, they are good to go. You may have a little bit of sticking because this is a lot of sugar in a tomato. And so there may, you may have to just gently tap it off. Then when you're done, simply, well, they're not going to pour into this one. That one doesn't need reason to do it. You're just going to put them into a container that's much larger than the quantity that you have to do. Because now we're going to go to conditioning, which this is a really important step about dehydrating that a lot of people forget to do or don't know about. What this does is help protect your food so that you're not putting something onto your shelf that actually is not quite dry. So that's what we're going to be checking for. We're going to equalize the moisture amongst all the pieces. And then we're going to check for things that stick, things that look not dry, any kind of moisture that forms on top of the pieces or even within the jar itself. So I'm putting them in a rather large jar. This is not what I will store them in later. But so for this size jar, oops, sorry. And then we're going to cap it. Oh, wrong lid, Darcy. Correct lid, Darcy. Then we're going to cap it. And what we're going to do is every day we're going to have it on the counter and we're going to pick it up and shake it. And what we're looking for is to make sure that none of the pieces stick to the side so hard that you can't just shake it off. That all of the pieces still look dry, that it still sounds dry. Instead of being plunky, you've got that higher ting sound when you shake them around. So we're just looking for any moisture. So do this for about 5 to 7 days. Once you're done, then you'll move on to storage. Okay, now you've had your 7 days to condition your tomatoes. You know they're good to go. They are not sticking, they're dry, they're good. So what do you do next? You're going to put them into dry storage. You're going to put them into a container that's approximately the same size as the amount of tomatoes you're putting in. Today I have not quite. Mine is just a little bit too large for what I would normally store it in, but because I'm going to be doing a couple of things with this first, I'm going to use this container right now. But typically these would be stored in like a pint size or maybe a little more, like a pint and a half if I have that many. But this is basically what you do with it. This goes on your shelf after you've marked your jar, you've marked the date, and if you decide to put a moisture absorber in here, that's awesome. But what you don't want to do is store these in oil. And let's do that next. So you want to make your own sun-dried tomatoes. That's awesome. But here's the way to do it, and here's why you shouldn't just store your tomatoes in oil on your shelf. Okay? The possibility that you've got moisture left in your tomatoes introduced into the oil in a low oxygen environment raises the risk for botulism. Now, while it's rare, it's one of those things that why risk it, especially when you don't need to. What you can do instead is do this for your own version of DIY sun-dried tomatoes. You're going to take a container, any size container that you want, and the amount of tomatoes that you think you're going to serve for a meal. Then you're going to put some of those into your jar. And this was a jar, I'm going to give you like a little behind the scenes. I just did this so I could show you how it worked, and I had forgotten to hit the record button. So I'm just going to add a few more because I need some of these in a minute for a different reason for me for the blog. So I'm going to put these inside, add a few more to it. Just like that. Then I'm going to add a little bit more oil, and you can certainly add some seasonings if you like, or a little garlic to this to, to help season it up. You're going to do enough to cover them, and you're going to shake it up to get everything good and going. And then you're going to put this on your shelf in your refrigerator. You can store these in your refrigerator for 2 to 3 days, and you can then use these as sun-dried tomatoes. What's going to happen is that over time, these tomatoes will absorb that oil, and it will be a lot like what you can buy in the store. The problem is you just don't want to take the chance and put this on your pantry shelf. So how cool is it that we're going from these tiny, tiny little tomatoes to this awesome preserve method of keeping the tomatoes that you're going to be growing in your garden this season safe for use all year long. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again. Happy dehydrating.